Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast, episode 146. We're coming at you a little late. I gotta stop saying when it's late, because number one, you already know that. And number two, if you're a fan. And number two, it doesn't age well for me to be like, oh, someone might watch this in like a year and go, what are you talking about? It's not late for me. I just don't know how else to intro the podcast anymore. Hopefully I'm well woken up. I was up a little late last night finishing a game, which I'm going to talk about later in this episode. But I had a busy weekend. I was a lot sleepier than I thought I'd be. I had a busy weekend. Kat and I ended up going. Well, we did a couple things. She was over here all weekend. She met the rest of my family, basically the rest of my family. So that was fun. We went to go see a performance of The Music Man. Pretty fun show. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I say this every single time. I'm not a big musical guy. Not super into musicals. But if there's one that's good, I can enjoy it. And I had a fun time with that one. That's a classic American musical, The Music Man. It's fun. Basically, the concept is this takes place in like the 1910s or 20s, and it's basically this guy who's a traveling salesman. This was the era of traveling salespeople, because we had like railway infrastructure and stuff, and like an economy and all that. So he's like traveling town to town through like the American Midwest. He's going to Iowa, I believe. It takes place in Iowa. And his whole deal, he's like a con artist. He's like a snake oil salesman, basically. But what he sells people on is music and band equipment. And his whole thing is that, he gets the whole town in on starting a band. He gets them to order instruments and uniforms and practice sheets and all this material. And then he just dips. And he doesn't give them, because he doesn't know anything about music. He just leaves them with all this stuff that they don't really know how to use. So he comes to this town and he's trying to work his little ploy. But then the conflict that he runs into is that the librarian in town, who is, of course, is a sweet, intelligent, and unmarried woman. Unmarried at the ripe old age of like 25, actually knows a thing or two about music. So he's trying to keep her from finding out his secret, and maybe they'll fall in love. And it's actually a very, very sweet movie. And story. It's cute. And I was expecting it. I've seen so many stories that go in the direction of like, I can't believe you lied to me. And I was expecting that to be here, because at the time it was written, this is in like I believe the movie, the musical itself debuted in like the 60s, like the 50s or the 60s. At the time it was written, that wasn't a very common thing. But no, that's actually not the direction that it goes in. It went in a direction that I actually kind of ended up enjoying more than just, you lied to us. And it's cute. I had a good time. It was a good performance. There were a few acoustic issues with the theater, or it could have just been where we were sitting. And I thought it was kind of funny because at a couple points I found it very difficult to understand the words. Mainly in the music, and that's, I think, really, that's like the acoustic problem. If it was just dialogue, I didn't really have an issue making out what was being said. But when there was a bunch of music and multiple different voices all on top of each other, it was hard for me to pick out the words. And it was funny because there were these two sign language interpreters over in the corner, and they had a little spotlight on them, of course. That's like the area where if you're hard of hearing, you would be sitting there. That's kind of probably designated for them. And they were just crushing it. They were signing like their M. Night Shyamalan. And at one point, I was just having trouble, like, what exactly is going on in the song? And I looked over and I thought, the funniest thing about this is that I think I would understand. I think I'd catch more of the lyrics if I was deaf, or just understood sign language. But no, it was fun. It was a good time. And then the next day, the next day, on Monday. Guess what, guys? We actually went to go see that Fleshwater concert. I feel like I mentioned this at least once on the podcast, or I always forget what I've told who to and where. But this is the end of like basically a 5-month long story arc in my life of trying to get these fucking Fleshwater tickets. Because I love them. They're like my favorite new artist. And that was the concert. If you don't remember or you never caught it, I found out that they were playing in San Francisco a day after the tickets sold out. And the tickets were like $20 at first. And I was like, oh. And I looked on the resale, and it's like they started at $250. And I was like, oh, fuck. So I've just been watching ticket resale sites like a hawk for the last few weeks to try to pick up tickets. Ended up, because I knew that before the show they were going to go down in price. The closer it got, the more they were going to go down in price, because then the resellers are getting a little more desperate, and they need to drop the prices to try and actually make some money off of their purchase, right? So I ended up securing 2 tickets. We went to the show in San Francisco, and I've mentioned many times before, I hate going to San Francisco. And we were going to be there like at night, after dark. And I wasn't super looking forward to that. But it ended up being pretty good. It ended up not being too bad in terms of the conditions. Pretty quiet, all things considered, because the other thing is it was on Market Street. And if you know San Francisco, it's like, I don't really want to be on Market Street after dark. Just like for my sake, But it ended up not being a problem, which was nice. So we ended up getting there like a little early, which was great. It was at this small little venue. And we were standing in line for a while. So I'm glad. You can make a comment about being the Poindexter who shows up 2 hours early or whatever. But hey, we got those fucking seats. There was limited seats. It was the whole thing was like standing room, but there were seats in the very back. There was like a bench along the wall, and we got those, and my God, was that worth it. Also, I got to go to the merch line. Right now I got the tour shirt, because of course I did. And they were great. There were 2 opening acts. They played with, the first one was a band from Toronto called 9 Million, who I'd never heard of, but they were pretty good. They had some good stuff. They were a good opener. And then the other one was another group called Modern Color, and they were also great. I realized I'd actually heard one of their songs before, but I wasn't familiar with their catalog. But that was cool. They ended up playing some stuff that was unreleased. They played like 2 songs that are from their next album that haven't been played before. So that was actually really cool. And then Fleshwater got up, and they were awesome. I was super into it. I have to say, so I am not a big live music person, right? Like, I am not the type of person. I was talking to my dad. My dad went to like 1,000 shows when he was in his 20s and 30s and such. Because he got, as he calls it, he got the bug. Like, he just loved going to live music. I'm not the same way. I'm not like, oh, I gotta see. I don't care as long as it's, in roughly a genre that I like. I don't care what the artist is. I'm not like that, Like, again, I liked the opening acts, but I don't know if I would have paid money to go see them, just them, right? That wouldn't have been worth it to me. But and you might be the same way. Like, I'm not a crowd guy. It's kind of a hassle to get out there. Again, I don't like going to the city. To offset that, there has to be like a big upside. So that's why, for instance, like when I go to conventions, I have to be interested in the thing at the convention, because then I can that makes it kind of worth it to me, is like the experience, the vibe of the crowd is nice. It's nice to go somewhere where you feel like you don't have to explain yourself. And that's like a really nice feeling. And in this case, I would say that if you like have never been to a concert or something, I would say it would totally, and you don't think that it would really be your thing, I would say you should at least try it once for an artist that you really like. If it's someone you really like. Specifically because there is something really dope about having a song that you've heard 100 times, and then suddenly you hear it live, and it's like, oh shit! Oh wow! It is a very different feeling experience. I remember the first concert I ever really went to when I was like 12. I went to this like music festival. I got my mom to take me to this music festival because I wanted to, because Modest Mouse was playing, and they're my favorite band of all time. So they have this song, and they were great in concert, I thought. They had this song called Night on the Sun, and the opening is this very kind of twangy guitar thing, this very slow, like bum 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 bum. And I've heard that song plenty of times. And it was just, I liked it. But then I heard it live, and through these like gigantic speakers, and just like the vibration of suddenly it felt like a completely different song. It felt like absolute, like I always thought that was a very kind of low key, quiet, kind of very stripped back song. But hearing that, it felt just massive through like a big sound system. Like it just completely filled up the air, and it was such a cool experience. Like I've never had something where it just totally flipped my perception of a song, just from the fact that it was live and just the conditions that I was listening to it in. And at this show, the vibe of the crowd was great. Everyone was super into it. I'm a very like kinetic guy when I hear music. Like, I boogie a little bit. That's a generous way. I kind of convulse. I convulse to a beat. Kat was gonna get a video of it, but her phone was dying because she thought it was funny. But yeah, it was great. It was they were great live. They did so that's the thing I was telling her. I was like, so they've only got like 10 songs. Because they just have their album, and then they have an album from 2022, and then a demo from 2020 that has 3 songs on it, one of which was then re-recorded for the album. So if you just count it all up, it's like 9 or 10 songs. So I was like, yeah, they might like just like play the album or something. And that's exactly what they did. They took the 2 songs that weren't on the album, and they worked them into the set list, which was great. One of those songs is my favorite Fleshwater song of theirs. Excuse me. Oh my god. My favorite of theirs, it's called This If Anything, which was awesome. Like, again, great to hear live. Really cool to hear live. And then so they start playing the last song. They're just going through the album. I realize because I've listened to this album 100 times, they're just playing it in order, And I realized once they got to the last track, I'm like, okay, this has got to be the last one. Now, mind you, the entire show, they had never talked to the audience at all. And it was just like this they just got up and they started playing. And every single song just went directly into the next one. There was no downtime. It was just like a straight run through of their whole catalog. Everything they've released. Which I thought was cool. Lots of good choreography in terms of like the lighting that they did with the house. Like the lighting changed over time. It was really cool. Very like atmospheric and stuff. And they finished the last song on the album. And one of their vocalists gets up and he's like, hey, so we're Fleshwater and we've got one more. And I was like, oh shit. And they played, I don't know if it's like a completed song yet, because it was only like 1 or 2 minutes, but it was at least like a snippet of some unreleased material. And the super cool thing is that this was the first show of their tour. I think it's funny. The schedule on the back of the shirt that I'm wearing right now, the tour dates, is a little bit misleading. I think what happened was that they were originally going to start in Portland and then work down the West Coast at like a couple different locations before they went on to the rest of the tour. But they ended up playing. I'm pretty sure that the tour and like the merch and stuff might have been prepared, and then I think they got an offer to play at this big music festival called Sick New World. Great name. So because they were playing there right before this, like a few nights ago, and I was thinking, okay, they might have just like, okay, we'll just take that opportunity and shuffle around the start of the tour to accommodate that. So this was actually the first the first show, which means that might have been the first time that material was actually played at any location, which was sick. I am very, very glad that I got to see them. It was awesome. And if you're a big fan of an artist and they're coming to town and you're not that interested in seeing something live, I would definitely recommend checking it out at least once. Hey, maybe they'll be shitty in person, but I think that just for the chance that like you might have a really cool experience hearing some material that you're familiar with in a way that you in a totally new light. So that was a great time, and I can finally close the book on this concert because this got announced in like, I found that my finding out about this was in like December. So we're in May and it's done. If only I had a time machine and I could time travel back to the past and tell myself to go get those tickets while they were still available for cheap prices. But in order to do that, I would need a DeLorean. And what I'm talking about is we watched Back to the Future Part 2. So I watched I've seen the original BTTF, and I always thought that was a good movie. I watched it when I was a kid. I haven't seen it in years, but I remember it being a great movie. And classic, probably maybe the most influential modern time travel story. But I've never seen any of the sequels. Kat loves the sequels. She loves Part 3 the most because it's a cowboy story. Yeehaw. And she wanted to just watch them with me. So while she was over, we watched Back to the Future Part 2. I had always heard that this one was really popular. It's one of those rare movie sequels that that is very well received. And I knew the premise that they were like going into the future. And I obviously remember the cliffhanger ending of the first film. But I've never actually seen it before. So now having seen it, yeah, Back to the Future Part 2 is a great movie. That is a really, really good movie. There is a tendency, especially I feel like with up until the last maybe 10 years, I want to say that there was kind of a curse with sequels. big movie sequels, which was the stereotype of it's just the same thing again. It's just a rehash of the original film, because they're not sure really like where to take the concept. So they basically just remix the original concept and don't do too much with it. But Back to the Future 2 doesn't do that. It is a different. It's obviously still a time travel story, and it uses the same concepts, like the same rules that were set up in the first film with like changing the future and stuff like that. But you're seeing it in a totally different way, and you're jumping between lots of different time periods, which is cool. It feels like an expansion on the first movie, which is nice. The first one is pretty much all in that one time period location of like Marty McFly going back to the 50s, right? Like when his parents were in high school. It's mostly it's pretty much locked into there. But here you get lots of different time periods. You get to see alternate versions of the timeline with different characters. You see how one thing changes like another thing, and it causes like a whole domino effect to occur. And but it never feels overly complicated. It all makes sense. The other thing is like, so here's the thing that I thought was funny is it's one of those films that you watch and there's certain cliches in it. Like at one point Marty literally says, in English, please. Like he literally says that. And that would be like a groaner today, or you couldn't say that line unironically today because it's such a cliche now. It's kind of it's seen as like a little bit lame. But back then, I mean, it's the same feeling that I feel like if you go and watch Bleach, something like Bleach in the modern era, where like straight up there are so many like anime tropes. Like when you think of like shonen anime tropes, like Bleach is literally the fucking like nothing personal, teleports behind you, nothing personal kid anime. Like that is where that visual comes from, at least in the modern day. Some anime nerd is gonna be like, actually it comes from Toki Joseki Pinkopako, the 1985 OVA were about a schoolgirl ninja who like teleports and she's like a cyborg. And you watch Bleach today and you're like, oh wow, this feels very tropey. But back in like 2003, these are like where the tropes come from. Like a lot of this stuff is new and very novel. So, you put it in that context and it kind of, it smooths it over. Cause I think in that same scene where he's English, English doc, please. That's when he's explaining changing the timeline. And I was thinking like, yeah, this is probably like, there weren't that many mainstream time travel stories back then. And like when that movie came out in like 1980, it wasn't 85, it was like 87 or something, 88. The original movie was 85, I believe. There weren't that many time travel stories. It was pretty much like Jules Verne, like The Time Machine, like old stuff. Which people might have read in like, their classic literature class or something like that. And then there was, beyond that, it was like, pulp sci-fi stuff, pulp sci-fi magazines or novels and things in that area where it's a lot more niche. And a lot of people probably wouldn't be familiar with a lot of time travel stories or common tropes of time travel or common kind of mechanics of those kinds of stories, with stuff like the butterfly effect and changing the future or the grandfather paradox and stuff like that. I mean, the first movie is like based around the grandfather paradox. So in this movie, there's a scene where Doc Brown has to explain like, oh, well, you changed something got changed in the past. So now we're in an alternate timeline and the timeline split. And having a scene like that in a movie at the time was probably pretty important, because I'd imagine a lot of audiences weren't familiar with, like, they wouldn't immediately get what was going on. Compare that to, like, I don't know, like a modern time travel story, and something like that would just happen, and they usually wouldn't feel the need to explain it. They just be like, oh my god, the future is different, I have to change it. But back then there had to be like a scene to go into a little more detail to let people know what was going on. No, this movie's just really fun. It's just, well, not always fun. Some scenes are a little dark, but just consistently really entertaining. I was constantly I just wanted to see what was going to happen next, and I was enjoying what was happening at the moment. Like, that whole sequence, oh god, it's great when they go into the future, into 2015. And I remember being in, like, middle school in 2015, and seeing, like, all of these, like, oh, this is the year, in Back to the Future where this is supposed to happen. And, oh god, I love all the future stuff. I found that stuff really charming. I think there was maybe a danger of it not aging very well, because part of the culture shock, I guess, the time shock, is that Marty is, like, walking around in 2015. And I thought it's actually really funny, because from 85 to 2015, that's like, excuse me, that's like 30-ish years, right? Oh, fuck, hang on. 8, 9, 10, it's like 40 years. Bear with me. Don't laugh. Don't laugh at my math skills. It's like 40 years, right? I'm pretty sure. Oh, fuck. We're gonna roll with it, and that was a time of, like, 80s nostalgia never died, which I think that's funny. But he's there, and part of it is he's seeing the culture of his day, which is when the movie came out, and it's in, like, an antique shop. I thought that was really funny. Like, it's like a whole antique shop for 1980s merchandise and stuff that at the time was new. And I feel like, I don't know, there could have been a danger of that not aging very well. Like, oh, it's kind of, oh, haha, yeah, that's old now. But no, it's actually, I think especially just having the context in mind of when it came out, I think that stuff's really funny. I don't know, I love that whole sequence of him going into the future and seeing all the things that are different. A lot of the ideas are just very fun, like great visuals, the hoverboard. I love the 1980s themed cafe, where I thought this was kind of cute. They have, like, these AI robot waiters that are the idea is, like, you could get but they're like, it's almost like deep fakes. The idea is, like, oh, it's like a screen with a face on it, and you can order a burger from a weird looking Michael Jackson, who it's still like black Michael Jackson, which is funny. But like the background, like, it looks like Max Headroom, which I thought was very funny, because that would have been the frame of reference for, like, an AI generated robot, like, I don't know, like, computer character, a prehistoric VTuber, you might call it. So that's funny. The guy who plays Biff's grandson, I think, grandson, is just great. He's just like a fucking lunatic. He's like Yamazaki from KOF. He's just, hey dude, I'm gonna fucking kill you. he's crazy. He's really those guys, they're so hammy, but it's so much fun. And the great part is that Marty is just, like, he's trying to hold back his culture shock, and that he's freaked out by what's going on, and he's trying to play it cool and roll with it. And that contrast is really funny to me. I don't know. I love the idea of, like, getting the sports. The big conflict is that they get the sports almanac, which tells them the results of every sporting game for the last 50 years. And then old Biff goes back in time. He steals the DeLorean to give it to his younger self, and that ends up fucking up the whole thing, because this Biff who's like a fucking maniac, who's like an actual murderous psychopath who should be institutionalized, ends up becoming a billionaire, and he's basically Donald Trump, and that is great. It's such an engaging conflict. This whole thing of like, I am on the edge of my seat as Marty is trying to steal this fucking, going back to the past again to steal this sports almanac. And it turns into like this, it's so much fun. It is such a fun, creative, cool movie. And I think it holds up really well, I think. I haven't seen it. I don't have any nostalgia for it, and I can say it holds up really well. It's a really good time, and it's totally worth a rewatch. And yeah, it makes me want to watch the third one. The only reason we didn't is because we didn't have time. So that was cool. Totally give a thumbs up to that. A couple things. We're going to get into the gaming. We're going to get into the real shit 30 minutes into the podcast. So first of all, big deal. Evo Japan was wrapped up a couple days ago, and there were tons. I'm telling you, tons of announcements and trailers and stuff. And there's two that I want to talk about. If you paid attention, you already know the big one for me. But I'm going to start off with Akuma. Yes, Akuma is actually the smaller one. So Akuma is obviously the most hyped character of Street Fighter 6. Everyone's been excited for him since the leak, because you look at that concept art and you're like, oh shit, he looks so fucking cool. Yeah, turning his hair white and giving him like this big, like old sage beard was great. It feels like what the Street Fighter V design was trying to be, but they finally like figured out the right draft, like the right version of that look. And it's awesome. So he finally got his full reveal trailer. There was a little teaser for him a while ago, and they've been teasing him with just through some little like artwork that's always it's never shown his full design. Now we finally get it in the light with gameplay, and yeah, he looks awesome. He's Akuma. He's a character you expect is going to be absolutely fucking busted, because that's kind of part of his identity, you know? Akuma was like the original fighting game super boss, the secret super boss. And it's almost, it is literally like part of him that he's expected to just be really strong. Like, it wouldn't feel right if he was low tier. He hasn't been top tier in every game that he's been in, but he's always at least been pretty good. At the very least, you know? At least, you know, by the end of whatever game's lifespan, he is like one of the most consistently strong characters. He's one of those characters who has tools that just make him generally good in Street Fighter's system, no matter which permutation of that, which variation of it you plop him into. It's just he's got the basic all-rounder tools of a Shoto character. He's got a projectile to, you know, control long range. He's got a DP to anti-air. But then he has these crazy mobility and approach options. He has an air fireball, which lets it travels like at an angle downwards, which lets him control space in a way that no one else gets to. He has a dive kick, which allows him to like do these crazy funky mix-ups and approach you in, again, like other untraditional ways. He has the demon flip, which gives him this kind of difficult to react to mix, or it just puts you in like an immediate pressure situation. He flips upward, and like, oh god, he's got all these different follow-ups he can do. And in this game, they've even added to his kit, which I think is great. It's additions that I think I really like to see. So the first one is that they have really done well to, I think, make him like the dark mirror of Ryu. I think that's the ways that Ryu's kit has been added onto, Akuma kind of mirrors. So Ryu, it's like, okay, so what are the two big things that he got in this game? He got the Denjin Charge to power up his next fireball, and then he got the Hashogeki, which is basically just like a Hadouken punch, just a close range, like palm blast. Which I think I think that move is really cool. Akuma, in this game, so he doesn't get the charge anymore. He doesn't have the charge anymore. They've instead changed it to he gets to power up his fireballs by holding the button down when he does like the quarter circle input, which I think is a really neat. I think that's a really neat idea. He used to have like red fireball on its own motion. It was like a half circle motion, but now he actually there's like a built-in waiting period, which I think is actually really neat, and I can see some cool, very tight execution being done with something like that. Like room for some really, really tight execution combos. What I'm trying to say. And I love the new. He now has 3. He's like Mega Man. He has 3 different charge levels to his fireball. So he's got the regular purple one. He has the red one, but now he has a new like top power. Excuse me. Top power version, which is like this really cool. It looks like it's made of magma. It's like a magma fireball, and it has this unique particles and stuff where like when it hits, it splashes this just bright orange yellow fire around. It's really cool looking. And it does 3 hits, which means that it basically it goes through like most projectiles that wouldn't be supers. Then it looks cool. So that's, I feel like, his equivalent of the Denjin Charge. And then his Hashogeki version is he has this new move where he does these like fire punches that look great. Like the effect on his hands when he does it, it looks like burning wood. That's what it reminds me of, like smoldering pieces of wood. And he just does like a punch. That's just a quick series of punches with it. It looks great. The EX version is super cool. Like I really like the fire and magma effects in his moves now. He used to just be like purple energy guy and sometimes red energy, but now there's like this additional like it just feels like the power of the earth, volcanoes and stuff. This totally sells his dark, very like primeval feeling. Like he's just this fucking incredibly powerful demon guy from the wilderness, who's the ultimate evil martial artist. It's awesome. And the other things are, just giving him, hey, remember all that stuff? Remember all that stuff from all that V system stuff from Street Fighter V? You just give them all of those things. So he's got the cool like slam down follow up after his DP now. I think I believe it's just on EX now, but like I don't mind. It just that he has it. It's such a cool part of it was a really cool part of his moveset in 5. He has like that upwards palm thing, like that launcher follow up thing that he had. That was one of his V skills. Looks really cool, it really like, man, Street Fighter V, that V system, I just because of this, I was thinking about it. So there's another thing. Another thing that got me thinking about the V system was there's a really cool mod that came out for 5 just recently. Someone modded Dudley into the game. So it's Dudley. It's a complete fan work. The model looks really good. It looks really good for what it is. The animations are pretty good. It definitely makes me appreciate the Capcom animation team, because I think the one thing, so like the mods animations, they're like a little bit stiff. And I think what it's missing is that like it's that motion capture data. You really see the lack of it when you see a character who doesn't have any, you really see the lack of mocap to kind of give some kind of natural sort of just sway or follow through to certain moves. It's just a little stiff. Really good for what it is. It's just an observation I had. But the main thing was, I'm watching this trailer for Dudley. I'm like, wow, they really did a good job putting him to the SF5 system and style, and his moves look really cool. And then it gets into V skill 1, what is it? Ducking. He's like forward command dash. And I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. I was like, oh, right. I have to choose. So like his V skill 1 was ducking, and then his V skill 2 is... I forgot what it was. It was something else. But it was it was cross counter. It's like, oh, okay. So I have to choose between having either the cool command dash that gives me like cool combo extensions, or this fun counter move. Okay. Like, it's just like a bit of a, it's just about like, why do I have to choose? Why can't you just have both of them? And it's like, I don't want to blame the mod creators for that. It's just, that's just how the system works. And it just reminded me of like, it's just like that bad, just kind of like a bad feel. It's just like a kind of a bad feel system, where like I have to choose between two things that I think are cool that I just wish I could use, And that was, I think, one of the biggest improvements. Just gonna be straight up. One of the biggest improvements I feel in 6 is just give the characters more stuff and don't force the player to have to choose. Don't force them to have to give something up. There's a video by, who was it? It was something like The Illusion of Choice in like a fighting game. I forget who it was. It was like I think like a smaller like fighting game channel. But they were like talking about how, on paper, these systems give you meaningful choices, meaningful choices, that buzzword. I remember that in League a lot. People would make fun of that. But in practice, what it really is like all that stuff that you're deciding before the match, actually gives the player less choices overall within the actual gameplay, right? And that just doesn't, it's more of a limiting thing than it is an interesting decision to give the player. I would rather just give this, that's why like I never liked the idea of variations in Mortal Kombat, because I'm like, just give the character all that stuff. Like I remember reading a review of like MKX when that game came out, and it was like, the reviewer even then was like, man, I just like don't want to have to choose a version of Raiden that doesn't have a teleport. I just wish I could do all the other fun stuff and have a teleport. And just, it's just a bummer. I'm not a super big fan. Unless it's something like CVS2, I feel like that's a system that warrants it. Because in that game, it's like the groove system. Those are like literally different system mechanics that you're choosing. Like completely different. Like the meters work totally differently. Like they are not compatible with each other. But Akuma looks great. Oh, this Raging Demon. This is, I think, one of the coolest takes. The coolest, why'd I say it like that? The coolest takes on a Raging Demon, I think, in any of the games. It's different. The Raging Demon has always been covered in shadow and black, and that was always part of the cool factor, was you can't see exactly what's going on. There's a mystery to it, what exactly is happening. It's just this flurry of strikes. And they made the decision that, like, okay, we're going to show you the whole thing. And it's like, okay, if you're going to take away the mystery, it better be worth it. It better look cool, right? And oh god, they fucking delivered. So the Raging Demon, the lore has always been, essentially what's happening is Akuma is punching your soul He is basically like directly striking at your soul, not your body, just your literal spirit, and like destroying it. So the way that they show that is this crazy, he's practically like punching you. He does the demon like forward. What would you even call that? It's not a slide. It's just this weird like forward teleport thing. The classic where he just like zoom towards you. And it's basically like he literally takes you to another dimension. Now you're seeing inside like the spirit realm, and it's all black and white. I think there's a very clear inspiration from the Japanese calligraphy style with the black ink on white and stuff like that. And he like strikes you, and then you just get like this shot of like all of these copies of Akuma. Like he's so he's like he has like 100 clones of himself, and they're all just like dive bombing you and just like smashing you at once, and it's really, really fucking cool. It is, it was totally worth it. Taking the mystique out of the Raging Demon, I think like they really justified. I think it was really worth it. For that visual. That's exactly what I wanted it to be. Some kind of crazy spiritual attack where it's like impossible stuff is happening because you're in like the spirit world. Just great. He's gonna be cool. I probably won't play him because I've just never really been interested in Akuma gameplay wise, but he's just great to have back. You know what I wish they'd give him? I wish they would give him Evil Ryu's axe kick. I don't want Evil Ryu to come back. I'm not a huge fan of him being in the game. Again, I would just rather that you gave Ryu more stuff rather than split. Be like, nah, Ryu doesn't get to have cool stuff. We have to give it to his epic, edgy, evil version. I just wish he had the axe kick, because that was like the evil version of the donkey kick that regular Ryu has. I kind of wish they would just give it to Akuma, because I don't know. I think it's always been one of the coolest looking evil Ryu moves. It's probably my favorite animation of his. It's such a unique axe kick. I love the final. He just lifts his leg up. There's this moment of anticipation. Then he slams it down. And that pose of like the legs kind of bowed out and the fists like ready at the sides of the hips and stuff. Like it's such a great, just strong looking pose. I wish Akuma had some kind of equivalent to that, but hey, whatevs. I can't complain. He looks great. Awesome design. His classic costume looks great. The stage looks awesome. The second new stage of the season. So it'll let's go Kuma. Let's go Coomers. But none of that shit matters because fucking the Slayer trailer. Slayer's here. Slayer is here. Okay, I've calmed down a little bit. I mean, it's been quite a few days. It's been a couple days since then. It's been like 2 days since the trailer for Slayer dropped. And yeah, I was really happy. There's a video of it. I posted it on Twitter because Kat took a video of me. I'm not joking to you. He showed up on screen and my nose started bleeding, which might be alarming to some of you. I am very prone to nosebleeds. That's just a thing I've always had since I was a kid. It's funny, my mom was telling me the other day, because that wasn't even the first time that day that I'd had a nose. That wasn't even the first nosebleed I'd had that day. My mom was telling me how our school nurse, because my brother also got a lot of nosebleeds when we were kids, just like out of nowhere, right? Was like, I think your sons have a blood infection. She was like, shut the fuck up. So it's just always been, you know what I think it is? I think I just have like a very thin lining in my like nostril or whatever. Like I think it's just kind of thin in there, because basically it only really happens when either it's hot and or dry, because like the blood vessels expand and stuff, and I think it just makes it easier to rupture. But I'm very prone to nosebleeds, And to me, it's just regular. Like I keep like literally right now at my desk, I have like a paper towel just in case, like just cut, because it'll just happen out of nowhere, or I make the lightest little scratch like of an itch on the inside of my nose, and like, oops, you're gonna be bleeding for 5 minutes. All right, cool. We'll just wait this out. But yeah, I saw him. My nose started bleeding. It was hype as fuck. He's a vampire, so I was trying to coax him out. That's what was happening. He looks fucking great. I love the redesign. I'm really curious to see what the alt colors look like. The most minor gripe that I have is just that it's like he's like full black now. That sounds weird. I mean, like he now has like a dark colored vest as well, where previously he had like a white undershirt, just to add some like contrast to his look. But yeah, so I am a huge fan of the design. I love he's wearing a longer version of his jacket, but it's over his shoulders now. I think it looks awesome. It just like, okay, Akuma. Slayer is my favorite, not even Guilty Gear character. He is my favorite fighting game character of all time. He is my favorite one. He is my literally me character. He is so fucking cool. He loves his wife. I found out apparently I'm a wife guy. One of my friends called me that a little while ago. I was like, what the fuck does that mean? I came home. It just means I love my girlfriend. And I talk about her a lot. It's like, yeah, of course I do. I love her. You don't? I think that's weird. Personally, I think that's strange that you wouldn't. That I am somehow exceptional. I feel like this is like a normal level of affection to have. And that, that's, and the thing about Slayer, here's what I love about him. He's just a chill ass guy. He's been around. He's like 1 million years old. He's been around since like the dawn of humanity. And what has he done? He's just chilled out. He's reached the peak of physical and martial prowess. He is an expert in arts and culture. He's seen like all of human history. And you know what he does with it? And he's not like one of those like he's not one of those like bitchy immortals who's like, oh no, I'm alive for so long. Oh, everything's so. He's like, the world is just a feast. The world is like a buffet of unique experiences to him, and he loves the fact. That's what's so cool about him, is that he loves the fact that it changes, because it gives him more interesting things to see. And they confirm that his main hobby is people watching now. Like he loves human beings because they're so unpredictable and they're always getting up to crazy shit. And I love that like nothing has changed about him. Cause like, why would it? It's been like 6 months since Exerd in universe. Why would he go through some kind of big character change? He hasn't for the last like 10,000 years. He's been the same dude. He chills out with his wife and he goes to the opera. And I believe the new stage, to get into that first, beautiful looking. Reminds me a lot of like that Winter Village stage from BlazBlue. Just like this beautiful, like winter time village scene. And I think it's actually supposed to be him and Sharon's vacation spot. They're doing some Spy Family Code White stuff. Now on to the gameplay. So visuals, obviously he looks great. He looks great. Everyone in Strife is animated flawlessly. I love the redesign. Lore-wise, I'm glad that they aren't really fucking with him. He's still just that dude. And now on to the gameplay. So did I talk about this? I don't know. I might have talked about this, but Slayer to me has always been a very streamlined character, where I felt like you could convert him into Strive pretty 1-to-1, and I think it would work fine, personally. So I was just more so curious about what would be different about him. And a lot is different. There is a lot of different stuff. he looks like he has gotten a decently sized rework to his kit. And does that upset me? No, I don't care. I have the last 2 games, and they both with rollback, perfectly playable. You know, I'm more so just curious, like, what is the new interpretation of his moveset going to be? And for being massively reworked, I don't know if most people will pick up on it, but it is a really interesting smorgasbord of ideas from previous versions of the character. Mind you, there's no starter guide out, so I could only go off of what's in the trailer, but there's a lot that you can already pick up. So number 1, the biggest thing, he has normal Gatlings now. And some people, I think the initial reaction, especially if you don't play him, is to oh no, they took away the unique thing about him. Okay, let's be real. So when Slayer was introduced in XX, one of the unique parts about him is that he did not have the universal Gatling chains. So he couldn't go from punch to kick to slash to heavy slash to dust like every other character. He could get that stuff. No, well, not all of it necessarily, but he could get versions of that. He could do 2K into 2D, but it's a link. You have to time it. So a lot of his stuff was actually performed via links. Stuff that other characters get for free. And that is one way of balancing out his massive damage output in that game. And it works. And there is some real... And I love that in XX. I think that's really cool because he gets some very, very cool combos, and he gets to do stuff that no other character is allowed to do. He gets to combo close slash into far slash back into close slash if your timing is it's like a 1-frame link, but it's super cool, and it does it adds up damage really fast. He gets to do really neat stuff like that if your timing and your execution is good. That makes a lot of sense in a game with no input buffer. And then you go to Exerd, which has a 3-frame input buffer. And I'm going to be real with you, even in Exerd, man, the way that he was designed, it really doesn't make sense. It makes significantly less sense. Straight up, I think Slayer in Plus R is actually a decently difficult character just to pick up, right? Slayer in Exerd, because just doing basic stuff requires practice. Slayer in Exerd is trivially easy to pick up. He basically gets one of the ways I've heard it described is that he gets a lot of the genuinely just a lot of the things that were links that were kind of difficult or required good timing in Plus R. He just gets that shit for free. There is so little timing involved. It is crazy. It feels trivial. It feels trivial to get most of his links in Exerd. And so it's just one of those things where the character was originally designed. An older Arxis thing is they really liked to balance characters out by giving them difficult execution. And once you get further into the more recent modern age of fighting games, really difficult execution is not the most necessary. Things like input buffers, it's just modern things that people just agree sort of feel good. And it's just a design philosophy that is not compatible with it, right? So they've given Slay also Strive is not a game with Strive does not have character-specific Gatlings. It does not have unique Gatlings. Which means that if he didn't have universal ones, he would be doing entirely linked stuff, which again would be kind of a pointless endeavor because of how generous the modern input buffers are. So he just has regular links. He is doing. I didn't catch that it was close slash, But he has a couple new just animations for his existing moves. He is doing like close slash, far slash, heavy slash, which is wild to me. It's crazy to see Slayer doing something like that. That's one part of it that I really mind? No, not really. A couple things. I think he has a new 2S. His 2S was always his one of his go-to anti-airs. I'm very curious. There was not a single 6P in that video. Not a single one in that trailer. I'm very curious if it stays in and if it is as infamous. I would be a little bummed if it was different, if it was a different move, or if it was nerfed in some way. I would be bummed because I feel like that's a very classic Slayer move, that I feel like is kind of part of the character. Excuse me. And it's just a command normal, it's not like a special move or something like that. I feel like they could keep that in. But he has this kind of like low swiping 2S now. I think it is. I think it's 2S, but it has like a vacuum effect on it. That's cool. Okay. The dandy step. He has a forwards dandy step now, which he kind of did. He had cross up dandy steps in plus R. I don't know if the new one is going to allow him to cross up. But it at least moves him forward. And that's really interesting because it kind of completely changes the design of the character. Because previously it was like, if you wanted to advance forward with Slayer, what were your options? Walk forward slowly. Do a very slow committal teleport dash. Do Mappa Hunch, which is his like just rush punch move. Which is it's like -2, but it gets you in, and it has a bad hitbox. Or you do like, he has one of the slower air dashes in the game. Or you do Dandy Step, which has a built-in kind of telegraph because he has to do the back sway first before he does the kind of swoop forward. Now he just moves forward, and it's definitely Dandy Step because it has the same animation. It has the exact same smear animation that the forward part of the previous versions of the move have had. The follow-ups are different. So he has a low follow-up. Okay, so here's the thing. When I say it's like a mishmash of previous Slayer ideas, he's got moves from his EX version in Plus R. If you didn't know, in Plus R, they were kind of like running out of content. Like, how do we add new content to the game? One of the ways they did that in Plus R was to add alternate EX versions of every character. And EX characters were basically like the Street Fighter IV Omega mode, where they were alternate movesets for existing characters. And the EX characters, they're really cool. They are really neat. Some of them are very slight alterations on existing things. It's stuff like, Soul and Kai have changes that make their move. They're basically like, it turns Soul more into Kai and Kai more into Soul. Like, it's cool. Slayer is a completely different character. He is a wild Rekka character who has like this forward dandy step that he can go into he looks like his command list looks like a Melty Blood character with just 100 different Rekka sequences. And one of those is he has this like low kick, like this low kind of sweep kick. And that is in Strive, which is kind of crazy to me. He can combo off of it. It's like because it launches them slightly airborne when it knocks them down. As it knocks them down, it leaves them slightly airborne. He like combos it into close slash and juggles them upwards, and that's cool. Still has J2K, which is neat. That's always been like his kind of air combo, sort of like the connecting tissue of his air combos, because that's always like it like relaunches the opponent in the air. He's got these new dandy step follow-ups off of this forward version. He has this low sweep. He has It's Late, which is his big overhead palm move. The big smack, So he can now do it raw, which is I'm actually a big fan of. In Exerd, they took out raw IL, and you had to do it after his slash follow up, the under pressure. You could only do it after under pressure. And they replaced instead of being able to do its late raw, they replaced it with Helter Skelter, which is his weird, funny leap up into the air and like slam his boots down move. Now there's almost like a version of that where he does like this slam. He does like he has another slam move. I don't know if that's Helter Skelter again or what the hell that is, or if that's an overhead, or if that's a low, or I don't know what that is, or if it's a combo start. Who knows? A combo ender. He uses it to break the wall, so that's neat. So he's got at least those 3 follow-ups. No crosswise heal, from the looks of it. It might be, I don't know, in some other form. I've got no clue. And then the big one is Pile Bunker. Now here's my theory. He does a backwards dandy step. He does the classic backwards dandy step into Pile Bunker. Here's my theory. I think that it's just one move now. I think that they have gone with a direction of Slayer being a forward advancing character now. And given his regular, his kind of focused his dandy step around being a forward advancing move, and the backwards then forwards like kind of bait them out into hitting something, like, you know, shuffle out of the way and then hit them with the Pile Bunker. I think that's now one move. Like, it's going to be one command, shuffle back, and then do a big punch. Because I didn't see them do anything else. He might have crosswise heal out of it. They could say, like, okay, the backwards dandy step is for the big punish moves. That could be neat. Like, he has crosswise out of that, and like Pile Bunker and crosswise heal out of the backwards one, and then all of these like mix up focused ones out of the frontwards moving one. That could be neat. I don't know if that's what they're gonna do. But at the very least, Pile Bunker's still in the game, so it's still a good game. Command Grab, same. I mean, I knew he would have it. He's a vampire character. He's got to have a bite move. And it looks like they have carried forward a mechanic from Exerd. So you might notice that in the trailer, he does like this bite. He does his Command Grab on Axel. He does this cool thing where they do like he does his 2S, which has this new vacuum effect, pulls Axel in, and then basically just does like a strike throw mix up, goes for the Command Grab, bites him, Axel gets knocked down, and he moves forward, and then he does the forward dandy step into its late, the overhead, and it hits Axel, and you get this huge counter hit. But it doesn't say counter hit. The screen goes to like the background turns into stars, and it says universe. So here's what this is. So Slayer's blood-sucking universe, which is that's what that move is, that Nago Ryuki stole from him. He copied it. In Exerd, they added this mechanic to it where if he landed his Command Grab, he got this buff on him that would make his next special move guaranteed counter hit. It would be like a forced counter. Now it looks like I don't know if they've kept that where it's still a counter hit effect. I don't know if it's like unique or if it's just a visual thing. Because there's a lot of ways, if it's like this universe counter hit, right? It could be like, okay, so he hits its late and it gives him a huge ground bounce. Now that makes me happy because that's always how that move has worked. The payoff for its late has been if you hit it on counter hit, you get a big ass combo starter ground bounce. And it's like one of his biggest starters. So it gets that. And I'm thinking, okay, so right now I'm wondering, does he only get that on a universe counter hit? Or does he get it on any counter hit and it just, it's just its own thing? Could it be that like the universe counter hit scales differently? Like maybe it doesn't scale as hard as a regular counter hit? I actually don't know how counter hit scaling works. Or if that's even a thing in Strive. Uh, excuse me. So I'm curious how that goes. Maybe they want him to be like a two-step character where he has to land the command grab. That would be a little annoying. He has to land the command grab if he wants to get like the big reward off of his moves. I don't know. I don't know how that's working, but I'm at least curious. I'm glad they at least kept that mechanic because I thought that was cool. Because he's always been a counter hit focused character. That's a big part of his identity. Is that he pressures you, fakes you out, and then causes you to press a button, and then hits you with a huge counter hit starter. What else? Okay, so there's a moment here. So you don't see a single recognizable backdash from Slayer in his trailer. You don't see one. Except like maybe this one instance. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what exactly it's supposed to be. There's a moment where Asuka is like he's just running offense on him. After Slayer's been knocked down, Asuka comes up and he hits him with like close slash into his overhead like black hole drop move. And Slayer does this thing where he walks backwards for a few frames, vanishes, like he gets covered in darkness and like vanishes into like he gets swallowed up, and then he rushes forward from a few feet behind. He like teleports backwards and rushes forward, and does this. And I'm like, oh shit, that looks like a backdash cancel. That looks like the classic Slayer tech of the backdash cancel. But here's the thing. The move that he's doing is this weird like double palm strike, which I've never seen before. It's some kind of new move. And I don't know if like, does he still have backdash cancels, or has that been turned into like a move? Has that been turned into like, excuse me, like a reversal move now? Because giving Slayer a meterless reversal is definitely interesting. Definitely an interesting choice. I remember a lot of people dooming about the possibility of Slayer having backdash cancels in a game with a dash macro, and I'm here to tell you, it wouldn't have mattered. It would not have mattered at all having a dash macro, and I think a lot of the people who freaked out about that possibility or that thought don't actually play Slayer or understand how backdash cancels actually work. In simple terms, a backdash cancel is basically do a backdash, and then there's a brief moment where Slayer is invulnerable. It's after he disappears, but he hasn't actually moved backwards yet. And the idea is that you can cancel your backdash into a jump, and then you cancel the pre-jump frames into a special move by doing a tiger knee motion. So you do the special move with an up input at the end, and that puts you into like one frame of jump, like pre-jump, or jump squat, as some people call it. And then you can cancel that. That is then canceled into a special move. Because pre-jump frames are special cancelable. It is this very specific coalescing of like system mechanics that basically no other character uses. And that's how Slayer adds like 19 frames of invulnerability to any special move that he does by backdash canceling. And I will be the first to tell you, the hard part of doing a backdash cancel is not the backdash. It is timing it is actually timing the tiger knee input. That is the actual difficult part of it, is getting the timing, because you're trying to hit it in that tight window between when you disappear, but before you've moved backwards, and you're also, you can't even see the character while this is happening. And sometimes, especially in plus R, doing an actual tiger knee motion is it's very tight. It's pretty tricky. That is the actual part. I can assure you, having a button to do the backdash for you just means I'm doing one less input. It does not change the actual timing of the move. It would not affect anything. Yeah, shocker. Doing backdashes is not actually the most insanely difficult thing, one frame thing ever in the world. So it looks like they've kept it in some way. The idea that Slayer is able to disappear, dodge your move, and then attack you is still a part of his kit. I don't know if that like double palm thing is its own move. I don't know where that would fit into his kit. Because it's always been a special move that he's been able to do out of it. Could be a command normal. I don't know. Can he backdash cancel command normals now? That would be sick. Is that like the new 6P, the new 6H? Who knows? Because it's a very weird looking animation too. It could be, my inkling now is that it's some kind of counter move or something like that. Or, but what's weird about it is that like he already has at least one form of the backwards dandy step. So I don't know what the deal with that is. I am very curious to see how that's implemented into his kit. A couple things. Let's see, what are some other things? So he does still have his, a bunch of his moves are still there. He still has his JD, his classic JD, which is cool. That was in the screenshots, which I was happy to see. That's always been like his main combo ender in the air because it causes a hard knockdown. Looks like it probably still does something like that. I didn't see Undertow or Footloose Journey, which I think I said before, I'm not going to cry over it. His supers look great, as usual. His dead on time, oh my god, that fucking version of the move. Okay, so there's some weird stuff going on with his supers that I really want to see what happens afterwards. Because he does dead on time. Dead on time is his... he charges up for a second, and then he does like this full screen flying punch move. And in this game, there is a crazy animation to it where he basically like charges, and like the ground underneath him is like cracking and shattering as he's like powering up, and you can literally see his like muscles expanding, and he blasts forward and punches with so much force that he rips through his clothes. Not even, his clothes don't get like burned off or anything. They get like, he literally flies through them, and you can see them, if you pause, you can see them behind him. You can literally see them hanging in the air. He's left them behind, and they've been ripped in half. Which is awesome, and he's just naked now. So I'm like, is that just going to be a thing? Is he just going to be naked for the rest of the round or the match? Because if so, that's pretty funny, actually. And the other one, he's got another new super. Okay, so when I say taking ideas from his EX form, it's not just the forward dandy step with all the different follow-ups. He had this really cool super that was exclusive to that mode. It was called the Great Hunt. And he would basically, it was a command grab super where he like pulled you into his cape. It was really cool. Like very, very Meta Knight, like Meta Knight's final smash. He has a command grab super again, and it's this crazy looking, it looks like the startup of a Raging Demon. Speaking of Akuma, it looks like the startup of a Raging Demon where he like shibbity woos towards you. And he bites you, and then there's like a flash of this, there's this shot where he's young, like biting you has like rejuvenated him to like a younger looking form without, his face is he's younger looking, he doesn't have the mustache. And maybe he does some kind of follow-up after that. I don't know. Does landing that move give you like an install for the rest of the round or something? Is it just like he just is it going to be like he bites you, turns young, and then hits you with some big ass, like he's holding this flame in his hand. Does he hit you with some big ass flame attack and that expels the energy and he returns back to normal? I don't know. Either way, I think would be cool. But I don't know. It's neat that he has a command grab super again. Ooh, what else What else was it? His theme sounded cool. His theme was cool. Yeah, it looks like his other two were like his reversal super is gone and his dive bomb super is gone. Maybe Slayer always had 3 supers. There aren't that many characters in this game who have 3 supers. It's mostly just 2. That might have been toned down or whatever, or they might have condensed that. I don't know. Maybe some of them are invulnerable. I don't know. I saw some people theorizing that Dead on Time could be like powered up or something because the animation looks like it's charging up. I don't think so. Usually when you have a super that you can power up, or have some kind of additional input during, there's usually like a timing aspect to it. Like Sin's Tyrant Barrel is like that, where you have to time the second hit to get the clean hit version of it to do the most damage. But it, like in there, like the move doesn't stop, like it doesn't stop time. The Dead on Time animation, like the whole screen is paused. So I think it's just the animation, and it's just supposed to be a big animation because that's always been his character. 2H looks good in this game. The big bat stomp. It still launches. It doesn't give a stagger anymore, but it looks like it's at least a lot more viable for starting combos in this game. That was one of the things that I wasn't a huge fan of him in Exerd. In Plus R, the 2H like staggers on hit, and it's really fun. It's great. You can get like multiple of them in a row. It's a very fun move to use. It's always been like a just respect my space button. And then in Exerd, they went back to like an older version of it where it launches way up in the air and you can't really combo out of it, and it just kind of sends them away. And it's one of those things where it feels like you should be able to get a combo out of it, but they're just too far away. You can only do it on counter hit because of how long they're stunned in the air for. Here it looks like you can actually combo out of 2H on a regular hit. So I'm a fan of that, or unless if I'm remembering correctly, because he uses it once or twice, and I think one of them is a regular hit, so that's neat. Making it like a normal combo starter. I'm down for that. Oh yeah, Mappa Hunch is back. Shock, color me surprised. It looks cool. Looks great. Probably the most powerful looking version of it, like really big visual effect on it now, which I think is cool. I don't know, man. I'm very happy. I'm really looking forward to him. It seems like obviously very different take on the character, but I'm hoping like with I think the better instances of returning characters to Strive, that this is just like a cool, unique take on a similar gameplay style. Expect me to just be switching over entirely to Slayer from now on in this game. Yeah, I am very much looking forward to him. He comes out in 30 days. It's a long wait, but you know what? I'm not bummed about it because because that just means that there is a day where I am guaranteed to get good news. And how often do you get guaranteed scheduled good news? Not very often. I've got something to look forward to. It's always getting better. I'm very excited. I busted a nut when I saw him. He's my guy. He's literally me. And I very much look forward to playing him in this game. I will definitely be doing a stream when he comes out. So look forward to that as well. We're going to be doing day one Slayer stuff. So last podcast I mentioned that I wanted to finish Dark Souls 3 before I talked about it. I have not finished Dark Souls 3. In fact, I have dropped the game. And I'd like to explain why. So I have some complicated feelings on Dark Souls at this point in time. I might be referring to Dark Souls and just say that without saying Dark Souls 3 in the future, like during this segment. Just know that I am talking about 3, that is my entire frame of reference. Someone in the comments is going to say, well, this one's a little different. This thing might be a little different in this game. I'm sure, feel free to leave that, but don't, just know that, like, I am, if I say Dark Souls, I'm talking about 3. Also, I don't know if many of my complaints would be that different. I don't know if it would really change depending on the game that I was playing, on which one I was playing. Okay, so I guess I can start off with what the reason that I dropped the game and why I kind of doubt I'll be playing another Souls game in the future, or at least one in the series. Maybe there's like a Souls-like that will really get me. So, my primary problem with Dark Souls 3 is that it's about 20 hours too long. At least, how much time did I have into it when the last time that I played it? 43.6 hours. Yeah, I would say it's about 15 to 20, maybe even 25 hours too long for me. It is too long for how shallow the moment-to-moment gameplay is for me. For how shallow the combat is to me. So here's what I mean. And this is very much a thing where I am a certain kind of player, and I like certain kinds of games, right? This is also why the length of the game is important. So, at some point, I was playing Diz 3, and I realized that, okay, so the game for me really peaked with, at, what is it, Irithyll, I think, and Pontiff Sullivan. And after that, it was kind of a slow slide into realizing that I wasn't enjoying the game anymore. And it really sucked. It was really, really miserable. And it took me a while, and it took me a lot of thinking to realize why I felt like that. And I realized that, so I had this awful situation where I was continuing to play the game. I would win. I would like beat a boss, and I didn't feel good. I just felt like relieved that it was over with. And when I died, or I had to lose, or there was another big ass area that I had to go through, I just kind of groaned. I just felt frustrated that I had to keep playing the game. And I realized that I was really bored. I realized that I was feeling bored with what I was doing, and I kind of wanted it to be over. It was that feeling of being at school or being at like a job, and you really don't want to be there. You just want the day to get by without any big event happening, and you want to go so that you can go home sooner and not have to spend energy. And then something happens and you're like, oh, fuck, I gotta deal with it. Like, why is this more difficult than it has to be? That was what I felt. The moment that the bubble popped for me was when I walked into, what is it called? It's whatever area that Osiris is in. The Fallen King or whatever. Osiris? I don't know. That guy, the dragon fellow. With the wyvern guy, I don't know what he is. I walked in there and I had a page up of what are the optional and mandatory bosses, just because I wanted to know, like how it was a list of the bosses because I wanted to know how far along I was in the game, and maybe like where I needed to head next, because I there was like one or two moments where I couldn't quite remember where I had to go next. So I had that up, and I realized, I walk in, I'm like, oh, there's a boss. And then I go and check, and I die to him. My souls are in the boss room, and I'm like, oh, I feel like I need to, okay, I have to go fight him now. I find out that I check the list, and I find out that he's optional, and I'm like, okay, well, my souls are in there. And I tried him. I spent like 20 minutes or something, and a lot of that was just getting from the bonfire to his boss room, because there's a fucking like poison swamp and you have to wait for enemies. it's just a pain in the ass to get to them. And one time I died to him before I picked up my souls, and I lost them, and I was like, fuck it, I'm not trying anymore. And it was that moment that I realized that, okay, I don't hate this game, but I'm not enjoying it enough I'm not enjoying it enough to do anything that's not required of me. I'm quiet quitting Dark Souls 3. So I really had to interrogate how I felt about it for a while. And here's what I came to. I said this earlier, but to go into more detail about it, the combat of Dark Souls is the specific way that you play them is too simple and linear to interest me for long periods of time. So what I mean by that is, you're basically using one weapon, right? So if you think about a combat system, to me, is there's the components of a combat system are, what are the options the player has available to them? What are the specific challenges, like the enemies that they have to face? And sometimes, this is might be different depending on the kind of game. What is the environment that they are fighting them in? What is the level geometry, basically? Level geometry, I would say, isn't super, super duper important in Dark Souls. So for an individual combat encounter, it's there sometimes, but it's not a huge deal. It's mostly player. What's the player's abilities and what are the enemies? And in a single combat encounter, the player is basically using one weapon. You've got one weapon, and someone might say so you're using one weapon, and then the enemies themselves, there's a decent amount of variety across the entire game, but I find that a large majority of the enemies fit into basically a fodder tier, where they'll throw 2 or 3 of them at you, and they're not that difficult to fight on their own. You just have to kind of pay attention to make sure that you don't get caught off guard by any of them. Sometimes you have to drag one out. Sometimes, to fight them one-on-one. But most of them are just block one hit or dodge one attack from them and then hit them 2 or 3 times and they die. And no real challenge to it. Then there's the kind of slightly more elite enemies who actually require a little bit of dodging and timing. And those guys, you do have to put in a little bit of effort, and those were more interesting to fight, definitely. I think the game is probably at its best in fights like that, in the much more fights where one-on-one, where you have to pay a lot more attention to what the opponent is doing. I think those were a lot more interesting to me. And then there is I don't know. There's a couple of those are the 2 main kinds of levels of enemies you'll be fighting, and they'll sometimes be mixed. A more complex one will be supported by some kind of fodder ones, who are just kind of meant to make you move around and stuff. But for the most part, they don't change that much in terms of function. They'll have different attacks. They might have slightly different patterns, but I found that I was really fighting most enemies in the game, in the exact same way, with the exact same tool. The one very small set of tools. Your movement stuff and the one weapon that you're using. You might say, oh, but there's 1,000 weapons in the game. Yeah, but you're only using one. You're only using one. You're not switching between weapons within a single combat scenario. You're just using the one. And for long stretches of time, you're probably just using the same weapon, right? Even if you decide that you're going to use a variety of them, you're probably just going to use one for a couple hours. And for me, that has a limited shelf life. It can only be interesting for so long. And I think once I kind of wrapped my head around the combat, I realized Dark Souls is not really a difficult game. It's not a super hard game, but you die a lot because it's more of a game about endurance than it is mechanical mastery. And that's where I lose interest in it. because every fight is kind of like a Rubik's Cube. Some of the fights are more jumbled up Rubik's Cubes, but they're all Rubik's Cubes. And there is a system to figuring out a Rubik's Cube, right? Like I don't know it, but I know that there is one. And you can take like a regular, 3x3x3 cube, and there is a pattern that you can do, which will just eventually sort it out. And that's how all of the fights felt after a certain point, where it was just a cube that I was figuring out. And then after I figured it out, the fight became less interesting because I just had to be patient. I had a pretty well upgraded weapon. My stats I was like a decent level. I even checked with other people, like online. Like I sent it to some people in a Discord server to make sure, like, okay, is my build like completely fucked? And they're like, it's not optimal. Like, obviously it's not optimal. I was just kind of winging it. I had a basic understanding of what the stats did, but I didn't have any build in mind. I was just using, I used the weapon that I liked. I used the gear that gave me the best stats while keeping me under the weight limit for fat rolling. And I kind of just invested a lot into stuff like strength, health, my stamina. Yeah, that was like the main things that I invested into. Which I feel like the game is definitely designed to be beatable like that. Like, this is not a game where you have to be like 100%, 150% optimal to win or to complete the thing. Probably makes it easier, but like I don't need to. That also meant that I wasn't really engaging with the gearing system very much. So what I'm trying to say is that I had like, I didn't completely fuck up my build or anything. I would go through these boss fights, and it was basically just a matter of patience. Like, I was doing enough damage to them that as long as I just, like, I know basically I can figure out within, like, a couple, like, maybe 5 runs of the fight, I can see 90% of what the boss is going to do, at least in, like, one phase, right? It's not too difficult to figure out how to dodge stuff. I know how to dodge everything. It's just like, oh, fuck, I got hit by that. Oh, I got nicked by that. And then what got frustrating as I got further and further into the game is it felt like the bosses their damage got cranked up so high that, like, I could basically only take, like, I could maybe, like, fuck up a roll one time and then get hit by something that took me down to, like, 70% health. And then they would always have, like, one attack that did, like, 80% of my health and just killed me instantly. And I was like, great, awesome, great. It was just very, I don't know, punishing, I guess. And there was just a certain point where it just got really old for me. And I was like, it's just exhausting. And it's not fun. It's not interesting. I don't feel like I'm making any interesting decisions in these combat scenarios. I'm just going through the motions until one time I just happen to be patient enough and I get a good cycle and it just kind of works out. So I would beat these bosses and I'd be like, that wasn't hard. It wasn't hard. Every single boss in this game, I was like, it's really not that hard. It's not that hard. It's just the way that they act, the way that they're designed. The fact that you don't know the exact sequence of moves that they're going to do. They tend to have a bunch of different moves. You get fucking mental stacked by them sometimes where I'm like, when did you have that one? What the hell? That kind of thing. And if you just do the fight enough times and you know how it works and you know all the patterns and shit, which isn't that hard to learn, and learn how to avoid them or that you can block something, it'll just work out eventually. The problem is just it gets more and more of an endurance match the longer the game goes on. And I was just bored. I prefer games. I think a lot of my favorite games are the ones which give the player a varied amount of options to make in any given scenario, right? Like, I've talked about it before 100 times, but I love blood. And one of the reasons that I love blood is that just like the TNT in that game, it's like gotta be one of my favorite weapons in any shooter ever. Because the TNT by itself, just that, makes you look at every single room in the game differently. It completely alters your strategy for how you approach every single situation, because it turns every single wall, every single surface, every corner into like a potential attack vector. And then it's like probably the craziest example, but every weapon in that game has multiple different functions. And you'll go into a room and it's just a slaughter room, right? And you're like, okay, I'm gonna figure out a game plan. I'm gonna like go in. I'm gonna toss the dynamite here. I'm gonna switch to like the Tommy gun. I'm gonna like stun this guy. Like stun lock him to death, and I'm gonna round the corner and I'm gonna switch to the shotgun. I'm gonna like get 2 blasts to kill these guys. I'm gonna jump over. Like you can come up with like a whole game plan. And depending on, the person, you can approach the same combat situation in two completely different ways. And that is so cool to me, that you can play it in totally different ways depending on what you like, what kind of strategy do you think up? That's a very like mentally, like intellectually stimulating game for me. Where the player, not only are the enemies extremely varied, and the enemies all force you to behave in a different way, force you to move around. They control space in different ways. You also have a ton of different options to approach them and how to handle them. That's super cool. And that's something that Dark Souls, it's just not designed like that. It's just not designed like that. And you know what? I have been focusing on the negative, but this is only a complaint that I had after like 25 hours, right? Like, most of the game, or I'd say at least the first half of the game, I was having a decent time. I don't know if I was having a great time, but I was having a decent time. I could say that I was enjoying it well enough, like a 6, 7 out of 10 experience. It's only after the game drags on and on and on that I really started to feel the effects of how I didn't feel like I was getting any better or like I was changing anything. Anything was changing about it. It was like, it got very repetitive. Like the game had kind of run out of, it had run out of things to say, and it was just going on for no real reason. And that was very frustrating. That was where that like downward slump really hit me. Because I kind of forced myself, I felt like I was forcing myself to play through a game long after I otherwise would have dropped it. And I was like, why am I doing that? And what I realized was I was kind of doing it out of some form of ego, I suppose. Definitely part of it was me thinking, I hate the idea that I'm going to say that I don't really gel with Dark Souls, and someone's going to say, you didn't even beat the game. And then I would have to say, and then for the rest of my life, I was going to have to say, no, well, I got up to Lorien and I dropped the game. I feel like that's enough for I feel like that's enough, like, for my criticisms to hold weight, to get through like 95, 99% of the game before dropping it. And the idea of having that argument for the rest of my life made me sick to my stomach. So I was pressing on, and I was just throwing myself at this fucking boss for like 5 hours and just having a miserable time. I just hated it. I felt like I was wasting my life. And I play video games every day. And I felt like I was wasting my life playing that. And I figured, okay, honestly, fuck it. At this point, if I get up to the penultimate boss, and it helped for that I did like a lot of thinking on why I was feeling the way I was, because I was okay. I don't think beating, because it's the penultimate boss. I genuinely don't think that beating this guy and then the final boss is going to change my opinion on the game at all. I don't think it's going to turn me around in any way. I doubt anything's going to change because my opinion is on... I don't know. I just don't see any way that it could recontextualize things. So yeah, I just dropped it. I'm like, I'm having a miserable time. I just want to play something else that I'm going to like more. Because I would finish a session and I would just feel like shit. I would be so fucking... I would be in such a bad mood after playing it that I had to do something else before I went to sleep to like reset my mood. So I just dropped it. I just figured I'd drop it. I think it's just a style that is... I can certainly stomach, and I can even enjoy parts of it, but for the length that it goes on, it is well beyond the point where I feel like I don't think it justifies its length. Not to me, at least. And again, this is a very me thing. There are people who love these games, and stuff like that doesn't bother them. You know, the way the combat is laid out doesn't bother them. And that is fine. That is perfectly valid. This is just a thing that is specific to the way that I play games, to what I like about games. And you know what? I'll talk about some things that I liked about the game, because there are things that I do like about the game. Irithyll, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I can't remember how it's spelled. Every fucking place in this game is called something like Londithicol, the fucky tower. Every place is named like that. Irithyll is like one of the most beautiful environments I've ever seen in a video game. Like, I got out of those goddamn caves and onto the cliffside overlooking it, like the bridge and the castle town, and I was in awe. I thought it was breathtaking. It's one of the most beautiful vistas I've ever seen in a game. I'm totally serious. The art direction, especially for that area, is outstanding. I think it's my favorite area in the game. I love the way that it looks. I'm a huge sucker for snowy gothic castle towns. I love Kurthus from FF14. I just adore stuff like that. That cold color palette with the night sky and all the stars, the big lake. Just breathtaking. Great looking location. I just liked exploring it. I think it has my favorite room in the game. There's like this moment where you go down into the basement and there's these enemies who they're like these invisible kind of shadow people, but all you can see of them is that they're little like white eyes. They just got these white circular eyes, these beady eyes. And that's all you can see in the darkness. And I pulled out my torch and I'm walking down the steps and I see all these little eyes kind of like darting around. And then as I'm walking down the steps, I just see like a 3 or 4 of them just slowly kind of sweeping up the stairs towards me. These like barely visible shadows with white eyes. And it was so cool. It reminded me of something like out of Tolkien. And when I say Tolkien, I mean like, you know, fantasy as we know it today as a genre, didn't really exist. Like Tolkien invented it, basically with Lord of the Rings. And, you know, in that context, when the Lord of the Rings came out for the first time, that was like the first exposure of so many people to imagery and ideas like this that was so out there, right? And this reminded me of something like that, something so original and memorable. Like it felt like straight out of a book like that, where something that had no basis in something else. It was so original feeling, and the visual and the atmosphere. It just, oh my god, like one of the coolest. Just this little basement room that takes you like maybe 30 seconds to get through. God, what a great moment. I thought that boss, Pontiff Sullivan, it was more interesting to fight just because I felt like, so part of it was, I got to flex a little bit of my musical know-how because his attack patterns are in a waltz. They're in a waltz time signature. So I remember hearing, I was really struggling to figure out how to fight him. Like, because his movements were so strange and they just seemed like his attacks just came out of nowhere. It would just be nothing and then whoosh, super fast. So I remember hearing a friend years ago tell me that like Dark Souls 3, like some of the bosses have like, someone found out that they attack based on like a specific like time signature, like a 3/4 beat. And I remember, and I looked it up, and yes, he is one of the bosses, one of the 2 bosses who does that. And I went into the boss room, and I just counted 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, because it's roughly the same BPM as the boss theme, which I think is very, very clever. And yeah, basically all of his attacks, as soon as he starts the animation, all of his attacks are either on the 3 beat or like 6 beat. So 1, 2, 3, then he attacks, or like 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Like that's all of his attacks mostly. And then he like splits himself into 2, and you have to focus on like killing the clone to make him easier. And very cool boss. I felt great. I felt really good when I beat him. When I say the game peaked, like I think like that was the fight where I had that moment. And if you've never played a kind of a really difficult, challenging game like that, I had this moment. I've only ever gotten it with that one time that I beat Touhou 6. The only time I've beaten a Touhou game, where I'm really focused, and I'm not breathing very fast. I'm like breathing really slowly, and I've got like some adrenaline going, and my whole body is tensed up. Just watching, right? Just focusing. And then the moment, and you're like that for minutes on end, and then the moment that you win, the moment you beat them, you're just, and like every muscle in your body relaxes, and you feel like that kind of like afterglow of adrenaline through your veins. And it's like, dude, it is one of the best feelings. It's probably what drugs feel like on some drug feels like that. It is like, you feel so good. Yeah. And then after that, just, I don't know, nothing really matched up. Nothing felt as satisfying. I really felt like that was the peak of my experience with the game. Let's see, before then, things that I liked. It was somewhat rewarding to actually learn the flow of the combat. It's definitely a game. Dark Souls wants you to play the game on its terms. It is not like you can't just play it however the hell you want. You definitely have to come to it on some level. And I think once I figured that out, it was a much smoother experience. I think it's bullshit that enemies can attack you through fog walls. I can't believe that's still a thing. Like, if it was up to me, I would just make it so that as soon as you enter through the fog wall, every single enemy outside of the boss room will just de-aggro from you and just return to like their regular spots. Because there was a couple times where I'd walk through the fucking boss room and then I would like not immediately run out of the way and I'd get clipped by a fucking big ass sword or something going through the wall, and I'd start the fight with like already a hit taken. It was like awesome. Great. Another thing to make me more salty. Ooh, my neck. Let's see, other things that I liked. Yeah, it looks good. The music's good. I feel like I just felt really neutral towards most of the game. Like, I was pretty lukewarm was pretty lukewarm on a lot of it. Like, I wasn't having a great time. I wasn't having a bad time. I was just kind of going through the motions. It was like a long period of figuring it out. Yeah. And it's funny because I played so much of it and I just didn't get that much emotion out of it. I don't know why. I would get like annoyed if I died. I'd be like, fucking, normal stuff. Or I'd feel kind of good when I beat something, but I don't know, for the most part, I wouldn't say like, oh, I'm really into this. I was just kind of playing it because I feel like just because I feel like I should, I should have some kind of an opinion on a Souls game. Maybe that was like my tip. Like maybe if I had just played a couple hours of it and bounced off of it, I would, or not even bounced off, but just didn't really get much out of it. I would have just dropped it. But I didn't. I went much longer and much harder than maybe I should have, and ended up on the other side not really liking it. So that's my thoughts really. And I'm sure, and okay, here's the thing is I asked someone like, are the other Souls games as long? Because I might be able to enjoy one of these games if it was like half as long. But at the current, if they're all like this, I think it's just not made for me. It just kind of disagrees with me on kind of a fundamental level. It's not designed in a way that really excites me. Not really the thing that I want to sink my teeth into. I was never really interested. I wasn't interested in the lore. I wasn't interested in like every other weapon. So, okay, here's the thing. I played with the broadsword the entire game. I didn't realize that apparently there are direct upgrades. I got conflicting information on whether or not there are actual direct upgrades to like weapons that are just strictly better than like they're the same moveset and everything, but they're just strictly better. I looked it up. They said no. I asked someone. They said yes. I have no idea what it was. I played with broadsword the entire game because it was the only weapon that I liked. I just liked the speed. I liked how much damage it did. It did like an acceptable amount of damage. I liked how it could hit multiple enemies. I just didn't like any of the other weapons. They were either too slow, or they didn't do enough damage, or they were too linear, like the spears. So I pretty much played with one weapon, and every other weapon that I tried, I just didn't like. I didn't try out magic, because I know that you have to like totally commit to that, from what I understand. So, I don't know. I looked up a magic playthrough, and it kind of looked like more of the same. Like you get one spell, and then you shoot that a bunch of times. Maybe you switch to a different spell, but they're all like functionally very similar. Just not really, like, not very interesting options to me. There was nothing that I saw that was like, oh, that looks really cool. That looks like I could use that in an interesting way in a fight. Yeah, just, ranged do damage. I don't expect myself to play any other game in this series. Perhaps there is another Souls-like that fixes these problems for me. I'm sure someone in the comments is gonna say, but like in Bloodborne, that it's different. You would probably like Bloodborne. Maybe I would. I wish I could play it. I wish I could play it. Yeah, so that's my experience with Dark Souls 3. Probably will not be returning to the series. I think I just don't really like it. I'm lukewarm to negative on it. That's it. After I dropped that, I was like, I'm going to play Arkham Asylum. I got the Arkham games in a big bundle for pretty cheap because after I played the Lego Batman games, I was just kind of like itching. It's like, I just want to play more Batman stuff, but maybe not in like confined to the Lego formula. So I played Arkham Asylum. Always heard things about the game. I remember Arkham City coming out and that being a big deal. Haven't played that, but I finished Asylum last night. And that game is great. That is a really, really cool game. I realized a little ways into it It's basically Batman Metroid. Like, it is very, very Metroid-y, down to the way that, like, the upgrades work. There's this thing in Metroid that I've always liked, where the upgrades and the new abilities you get always have double purposes. They'll have some kind of use for combat and some use for exploration. So, the missiles, obviously, you could use them to shoot things, but they can also be used to open doors, open specific doors. Same with, like, the hyper bombs and stuff like that. The morph ball bombs, they can be used, obviously, as weapons, but they can also be used to break parts of the environment or boost your way up and do, like, morph ball jumps, which is cool. I think my favorite one would be like the freeze beam. Obviously, you can freeze enemies with it, but then you can use them as platforms to get up to places you wouldn't normally be able to. Everything has some kind of double purpose, with maybe like a handful of exceptions per game. But every upgrade you get ties in, it all intertwines together into the two things that the game is focused on: exploration and combat. And that's why I think Metroid games feel really good to me, is that they're very holistically designed. There's no fluff. There's no just like, yeah, this thing is kind of here, and it just kind of, it's sort of in its own little branch of the design. Like, everything works together to be a very focused experience. And that's really how Arkham Asylum feels, where like all of the upgrades you get have some kind of potential combat purpose, but also can be used for exploration. They're like consistently useful. This game came out at a time where licensed games were generally looked down upon. This is like 2009. They were looked down upon because, for the most part, they were basically just merchandise more than they were their own piece of art. They were just merchandise for whatever they were supposed to be promoting. And there were a couple good ones, there were some exceptions, but for the most part, they were just kind of trash. Nowadays, mobile game licensed games have mostly moved to the mobile platforms. And if something is on a console or on PC, kind of the bigger time systems, it's because someone had like an actual like good idea and they wanted to actually attempt something a little more ambitious. Might not always work out, but it's like a real game. It's not just like a piece of shit cash grab that gets thrown together on a tight schedule kind of thing, which is what it used to be like. And Arkham Asylum really changed the perception of licensed games. That was the game that I remember people going, whoa, it's a licensed game, but it's actually good? It's like, it's really good. And I think the real heart and soul of that is that Arkham Asylum is really focused on making a cool-ass Batman game. It is a really cool-ass Batman game, and it does everything that you'd want a Batman game to do. It's like, there's the hand-to-hand combat, the gadgets, the detectiving, the solving mysteries and stuff. All of that is there. You get a bunch of great Batman villains. Not everyone, but there's at least like references and things here and there. Tons of cool touches. It's all taking place in this great, like, compact, very focused location. The basic premise is Batman has captured the Joker. He takes him to Arkham Asylum. The Joker escapes, and it turns out that he's been planning this huge plot where he's going to take Bane's like venom, like Bane's like evil steroids, and he's going to pump it. He's going to pump a bunch of his goons up with it, and then turn everyone in Gotham into monsters, into big Bane monsters. Now Batman has to stop him. And you're exploring the various... Arkham Asylum is split into 3 different interconnected islands. Arkham Northeast and West. With a couple... each island is like a big... It has like a decently sized open area. And then there will be maybe 1 or 2 buildings on each island that are their own more intricate areas where stuff happens. You go there to do stuff. Uh, let's see. I mean, what do I even say? So I guess I can talk about the two main dimensions of the game are the combat and the exploration. I'll talk about the exploration first. So Batman feels very heavy. He's a very weighty character. The thing about this game kind of kickstarted the meme of it makes you feel like Batman, but it really does, right? Like, there's a reason that became such a cliche, was because, like, no, yeah, like, it really, like, everything, there's so many little mechanics and little moves that you have that are like, this is in the game because it's a thing that Batman would be able to do. And it's worked into the mechanics in a way that makes sense. So, you explore around, you can parkour over stuff. There is a very nice feeling. It's basically just the mobility button. You can run up to a wall, and if there's a ledge within reach, you'll leap up, grab onto the ledge, and then hoist yourself up. You'll jump over things. You can crouch down to go into vents and stuff. You can grapple around to tons of different points and hoist yourself up from there. You can grapple onto gargoyles, and like, it's great. There's like moves specific to being on gargoyles and stuff. The mobility feels really good. I think from what I remember, it gets better in Arkham City, where you can do like glide. Oh yeah, there's a glide. You can do like glide into grapple hook back into glide and stuff. And I'm looking forward to checking that out. It's like the one thing missing from this game, but there's a great flow to the movement once you get used to how heavy and just heavy Batman feels to control. Very satisfying to move around in the game. There is like one thing that I will say in the exploration that it's like kind of a gripe. Okay. So you have detective mode in this game. Detective mode is you press a button and you go into a mode where objects of interest are highlighted. Enemies, you'll see them with like X-ray, stuff like that. Excuse me. Grapple points will sometimes be illuminated. Stuff that you can interact with is highlighted, stuff like that. I like the idea of detective mode, and I think the way that it's implemented gameplay-wise is cool. It's used to, like, find secrets and stuff. There's a bunch of, like, Riddler... the main, like, collectibles are all these Riddler secrets, where every single area has, like, a bunch of different Riddler puzzles. Some of them are things that you have to, like, scan in detective mode to take pictures of, and that'll, like, solve a little riddle for the room. A lot of them are like trophies that you have to find in like spots hidden around the world. Stuff like that. And you do a lot of that. You find a lot of that stuff with detective mode. The problem with detective mode is that it totally fucks up the game's art style. Which is weird, right? It's not a gameplay problem. Gameplay-wise, I think it's fine. Like, it is, it turns you into Batman looking for clues. And that's a cool feeling. But here's the thing is, like, this is actually a very nice looking game for the most part, with a few exceptions. This game holds up visually pretty well. Because, yeah, it does have kind of dated graphics at this point, but the art style is great. The choice of colors, like, it's moody, it's gothic, it's dark, but it's very stylized. Lots of, like, greens, ambers, blues sometimes, like these reds, like gothic, creepy, spooky color palette. And it has a great, there's very atmospheric lighting in certain rooms and areas, and it's a good looking game just from its art style alone. Like, I think it holds up really well. And then you turn on detective mode and it's blue. Everything is blue. And there's this grain filter. There's like this very subtle grain filter over everything. And yeah, it was crazy to me how, I'm running around in this great looking outdoors area. The lighting is amazing. The colors are amazing. Then you turn on detective mode for a little bit to go find something. Then you turn it back off and you're like, oh, wow, this place looks good. Wait, hang on. I forgot that this game looks good. And it's just like this, I wish there was I wish there was some kind of solution to this that like didn't compromise the art style. The best idea I could come up with was like, what if it was more like a sonar, like a bat sonar type of thing where you press the button to like put out a signal. I don't know if maybe holding it down would get too annoying or something. I don't know. But like it would only highlight, my thing is like, what if it only highlighted the objects of interest or something, right? Like the little boxes that you can hack, or the grates that you can remove and things like that. What if it only highlighted that stuff? But then there would be like no reason to turn it off. So that's why I thought like maybe you could just, send out a little sonar and it would be illuminated for a little bit. But like, would that get annoying to have to keep doing that over and over again? I don't know. Maybe it would be like the scan visor in like Metroid Prime or something. Yeah, so it's like it's a good idea, and gameplay wise it's not a problem. It's just the visual thing. I just wish, because the atmosphere is so good. Man, the art team killed it on this. I loved getting all the collectibles, and where you would get character bios and all sorts of obscure Batman characters, and you'd get these little concept art sketches. I don't know concept art, but like official images of them, official drawings, illustrations, and they're all like, the art style is great, and I love just how all the characters look and just those little 2D sketches. It's great. The collectibles in general are just really fun to get. I ended up getting all of them. It's not too difficult. It's not too difficult to get every single Riddler challenge in the game. You get progressively more and more upgrades as you go throughout the story. And by that time, I was doing them, if I saw something, I would explore it. So if there was a Riddler trophy available to me, I would usually find it. And I just had to kind of go back. Once I got the final upgrade that the game gives you, which lets you like destroy breakable walls from afar, without having to like be standing next to them, because some of them you can't stand next to because they're like up on a ceiling or they're raised up on a wall or something like that. Once I got that, I just combed through every area that I still had to find. I hadn't completed 100% yet. And finished in a pretty timely amount of time. 17.6 hours for a first playthrough. Like, not a very long game. I feel like it could have even been longer. But definitely doesn't overstay its welcome. And I want to talk about the combat. I think that's pretty much everything for the exploration bit. The combat in this game is really fun. This was the first game that had the Batman combat, or the free flow combat, as they describe it. They like trademarked that too. This has basically become the combat system for, like just superhero games now, because it's great, it's stylish, and it's very easy to just mash on it, but there is a level of skill required to get really good at it. It's a good feeling combat system. Essentially what it is, if you've never played one of these games, enemies will come at you in hordes. And you have just a regular attack button. You have one attack button. You'll beat up on an enemy. And then you have another one. Well, it's not like in a lot of beat 'em ups, it'll just be like the other enemies just kind of like stand to the side while you're beating someone up. Here, you'll get like at least one enemy attacking you. And you have to press another button to counter. You have an attack button and a counter button. Every subsequent hit you get adds to your combo counter, and then once it gets to a certain threshold, you unlock new like special moves, like a special throw or a special takedown that you can do. You can use your gadgets in combat. You can toss batarangs to kind of stun enemies, and it will keep your combo counter up. You can use the grapple hook to hook enemies towards you and just like quickly engage them. There's like variations on the enemy. Variations are basically like there's a bunch of standard guys, and there's guys with like heavier weapons, like a pipe or a bat or something. There are like high security inmates who are basically guys who you can't attack them until you stun them with your cape. You have a little cape flap move that'll stun them, and that makes them vulnerable. And then there's like guys with batons who you have to like leap over, like do your dodge move over, and then attack them from behind, or otherwise they'll always counter you with the stun baton. So you take like these couple variations of enemies and you throw them at the player in some kind of mix, and it ends up creating encounters that are pretty fun. Again, right? Like again, yeah, you can mash through a decent amount of the game, but it highly rewards you for actually sitting down to learn a little bit of how the combat works. And I could definitely feel myself getting a lot better at it. So number one, there's straight up like a timing system. It's like a rhythm game almost, where if you just delay, it's not very hard to hit either. If you just delay your attack a little bit, like if you hit someone and then you time your next attack to be just after, like the beat after you hit the enemy, your next attack will be like a critical hit, and it has a higher chance to just knock them down. So here's the way that the combat kind of stacks up. Basically, the game will never throw a single enemy at you. It'll always be at least two, and usually more. So it only takes one enemy is very easy to beat. You just like punch. Every enemy will get knocked down in like three hits. And then from there you can do like a takedown on them. Where it gets complicated is, yeah, you can take up someone down in just like a punch. But maybe while you're doing that, before you can hit your third punch, someone's going to come swinging at you with a bat. So you have to do like punch, counter, punch, and then like batarang someone else to keep the combo counter up. Punch. And now there's a guy with a baton, you got to jump over him, punch. And like you're continuously having to keep the combo counter up, because so you're incentivized to keep the counter up because you get a big multiplier on your score, and the more points you get, points will be used to, number one, it replenishes your health, which is very Super Mario, and number two, once you reach a certain point threshold, you get to buy an upgrade, and the upgrades are very good. A lot of them are really good. It'll be like there'll be just make your health bar longer. But there's lots of like new upgrades for gadgets, things that help you find secrets better, upgrades to your gadgets that are make them better in combat and better, more utility in the exploration parts of the game. So like you want those upgrades, and getting higher scores helps you get them faster. Plus, it keeps your health up. So you're kind of incentivized to... Plus, it just feels good. It feels good to face like a dozen enemies and beat them without taking a single hit. That's a really fun feeling because it's flashy, but it does take some amount of skill and a lot of like situational awareness. I would say that's situational awareness and planning are the two skills that the combat system rewards a lot. Because you have to be aware of what is going on around you. You have to be turning the camera around to make sure you're not losing sight of any enemies who might be coming around to interrupt you, to smack you up. And you have to be planning around like, okay, you have to be planning like 1 or 2 steps ahead, because after I'm done hitting this guy, what am I going to do after that to keep my counter up? Because I can't let too long pass in between hits. So you're like forming a game plan of like, I can do this, then I can do that, and then I'll jump over to these guys, and then, whoa, something happened that I wasn't expecting. Now I have to change the plan a little bit. That stuff is exciting. That stuff is interesting to me. You have all these tools, and you're forced to use them in interesting ways. There are some cool stealth kill sections where the essentially, part of Batman is that, the weakness of Batman is, well, it's guns. If a man's going up against a gun, he doesn't have that much he can do against that. So you'll enter these big rooms where all the enemies are armed, and you can't progress until you take out every single enemy. But if you just take them on like usual, they're going to get alerted to you and just light you up full of bullets. So you have to basically stealth through the whole thing. And that stuff is fun. That stuff was cool to me. Because the rooms are typically laid out. I almost wish they were harder. Like, I wish there were more enemies. Because there's all these different ways that you can interact and sneak around the environment. There's like lots of room for cover in a lot of these rooms. There's grates that you can drop into and like go underneath the vents. There's or like under the ground and then like pop up. There's usually like vents that you can crawl through to kind of give you alternate routes around the space. There are like gargoyles that you could do. Oh, I love it. You can when you're on a gargoyle, you have all these unique options of, you can do like a glide kick. Actually, you can do that from like any kind of perch that you're on. So you can do like a glide kick where you'll just fly down and then kick someone and then just automatically stun them and put them on the ground. You unlock one of the upgrades it's called the inverted takedown, where when you're on the gargoyle, you can like hold the crouch button and you'll hang off like a bat. And then if an enemy walks underneath you, you can rappel down, grab them, and then pull them back up and hang them from their leg off of the gargoyle. It's great. The way that the enemies interact is really fun as you're doing it. Because you'll be able to like, they'll find like the body on the ground, and then they'll like call the other ones over, and then there'll maybe be like one straggler who's like keeping watch in the corner or something, and that's when you take out him, and they'll like communicate back and forth, and sometimes they'll just stick together and be like back to back, and sometimes they'll be like, every man for himself, and then they just run off from each other and abandon each other. And it does feel like you're this silent killer hunting, well, maybe not killer because it's Batman, but this silent hunter in the shadows, causing chaos and fear, right? Like Batman strikes fear into his enemies. And you feel that sensation growing the more and more of them that you pick off. It's really cool. So yeah, the combat, it's really fun. Just really tight system. Rewards good timing. Rewards planning ahead. Being aware of what's going on around you. Really fun. Like, I was always looking forward to the combat. I was looking forward to the combat because I was like, oh man, I want to see, like, what am I going to be able to do next? What's like the highest combo counter I can get and stuff like that. Here's the problem. It's a great combat system for group fights. The game is not built for one-on-one brawls. And that is kind of a problem when you're playing a Batman game, or when you're designing a Batman game, and you're kind of expected to have boss fights against the famous Batman villains. So this game infamously has a problem with boss fights, and it is definitely earned. The developers try. You can feel like, I feel like they were aware of it, because you can feel them trying to work around this limitation. Like, they knew that the combat system doesn't hold up in just a one-on-one. So they always add, like, okay, what are the main villain showdowns, right? Like, the first big one you get is Bane. And what is Bane's thing? He charges at you, you throw a batarang at him while he's running, and then he runs into a wall and hurts himself, and then you get to punch him a few times. And then intermediately, like in between sections of his health bar, he'll call down a bunch of goons for you to fight, like the combat system's actually designed for. And it's fine. It's just, it's okay. It's like a regular battle, but with a little like twist on it, and it's okay. Harley Quinn, you don't actually fight Harley. She just sends goons after you. She just sends a bunch of enemies after you. And, the fight itself is kind of neat. It's on this arena with 3 different sections, and each one has an electrified floor. And as one turns on, another will turn off, and you have to, like, run to the other one. And it's like, okay, there's, like, again, it's like a regular fight with a little twist. But you don't actually fight Harley, and it's like, I kind of wish that I could actually fight the character. Scarecrow is just a stealth section. The Scarecrow stuff in this game is great. Just like visually, I love the sections of like the fear gas sections. You could maybe say, I could see someone finding the actual stealth sections a little simple and not amazing. But I think like visually and they were doing with reality warping, really cool stuff. Like again, exactly what I would want out of a Scarecrow sequence. So that was good, but it's just you're going through a stealth section in like a nightmare, and then you get to the end and you shine a spotlight on him, and that's the fight? ? Right? Like they're working around it. Killer Croc, I think, was the most disappointing for me because he's not even a fight. He's really lame in this game, which kind of sucks because I love Killer Croc. He's a big crocodile guy. And what does he do in this game? Well, you're in his lair, and there's all of these wooden platforms that you have to walk along. And if you walk too fast or you run, you make a noise, and he pops up and he runs at you, and you just have to, whenever he pops up, you just throw a batarang at his collar, and he just goes, ah! And he falls into the water because you activated his shock collar. And it's like, okay, all right. Like, you never actually fight him. He's basically just an environmental hazard, and it's just, like, kind of disappointing because, like, you're doing something. The objective is that you're trying to collect these samples from his lair, and it's just kind of lame. It's just like disappointing. It's like, how else would they have done it? I don't know. That's what they came up with. And then the last boss fight is really shitty. It's like an infamously bad final boss. Like really stupid, schlocky, fucking steroid Joker. It's so dumb. Actually, the first time I got to it, the game bugged out on me. You go from like the inside of one building to the roof of it. That's the idea. Like the boss fight, you start on the roof. But I didn't get the cutscene. It didn't play the cutscene, so it just hard loaded me into the boss arena with Steroid Joker standing there, but like not moving, just A-posing. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? What is going on? And I had to restart from the last checkpoint, and then the cutscene played to tell me what the hell was going on. And then the last fight is just like embarrassingly easy. It is so. The fight before it is actually harder. The fight before it is basically like you're fighting regular enemies, but there's 2 Banes added into the mix, and it's actually pretty tough. Like it really gave me a run for my money. I had to try it quite a few times, and then you get to the actual Joker fight, the climax of the game, and you fight a couple guys, and then you drag him down you pull him down with the bat claw, and then you punch him a few times when he's stuck in the floor for some reason. And then he gets up, and then you run away from him for a second, and then he jumps back up onto the ledge, and then sends a bunch of guys down at you, and it's not even like a hard mix of enemies either. And then you just do that 3 times, and it's like really lame and easy. Very disappointing. Yeah, definitely an era, I feel like, of shitty bosses. I remember that was around the time that there was that, our boss fights are just this outdated thing that just, boss fights suck, and they're just really archaic. And all it was that there was just a bunch of games that had shitty boss fights. And this is definitely one of them. Yeah. And it really is just a problem with the combat system. It's great.
but just not for boss fights. And you're making a Batman game, so you know, you kind of want to have boss fights, right? Like, it's just a natural, normal thing that you want to include as a designer. But yeah, I mean, even just the way that they handled the Joker thing, like, Joker is not a character. When you think of Joker versus Batman, it's not a slugfest, right? It's not a punch out. It's a battle of Joker. Like, usually the best supervillains, like the greatest arch nemeses, are the ones who are able to put like the heroes in the most impossible situations. It isn't always just like brute physical force that they have to overcome. It's literally like, you know, it's like the Joker puts Batman in a situation where you can only do one of two things and someone's gonna die, and like that's like when Batman is under the most duress. You're not worried about Batman being able to beat up the Joker. Like, yeah, of course he can. I would have preferred if it was some kind of sequence where, yeah, like there was some Batman had to make some kind of ultimatum, and then you figure out an alternate, like basically like a trolley problem, but then you figure out, oh, there's a way that I can get both, you know? There's a way that we can I can win both ends of this dilemma he's put me in. And then at the end, just fucking give one punch to Joker and knock him out. That's what I would prefer. Yeah, but overall, like, that's a minor gripe. It's not a huge part of the game. 90% of the game, great. Really fun. I loved exploring Arkham Island. I loved getting the gadgets. Man, like, you don't realize how good... When you get that zip line is really strong for just transportation. Like, you can really just go anywhere as long as there's a wall behind you and a wall in somewhere off in the distance. Like, it is very, very freeing. And you get to explore so much of the island after that. Finding all the Riddler trophies was fun. Figuring out the individual... Like, a lot of them are, like, just the trophies, but I really liked the ones that were where you actually had to figure out a riddle based on the room. Like, it'd be like, oh, you know, who is this? Or what does this thing have? And then you're like, oh, wait, hang on. And then you find like a poster or a plaque or a painting or something like that, or a newspaper clipping on the wall. And you pick that out and you're like, oh, is it this thing? And you scan it and then you get a little reward for it. And there's a ton of little like tapes, which are like interviews with the asylum inmates. That gives you this background. Some of them have like there's like 5 for each inmate, and a lot of them tell some like good stories. Like, oh, if you like Zaz gets like a surprising amount of play in this game. The Voice of Arkham. That's a great little collectible series where there's these like plaques or there's these like statue things around, like hidden in very obscure, like inside of walls and stuff around the asylum. And you scan them and you get these audio recordings that like weaves this strange intergenerational story, but it's all the quote unquote voice of Arkham. Like the voice of Amadeus Arkham speaking to you, but it's almost like it's existing and observing things throughout time, or it's having experiences well after, you know, he would have been dead. And so it's like, there's like this whole mystery associated with it. It's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure when this came out, this was like the hypest shit, because it was such a well executed concept. Definitely a game that is worth going back to. And something it makes me really excited to play City. Now, I am not the biggest open world guy, but if there's enough fun, interesting stuff to do in the world and it's not filled with too much, you know, busy work, I can get into it. Like, I liked New Vegas because there was usually something cool. There's usually some cool... You didn't have to do too much walking before you found some sort of interesting location with a little storyline, or just a cool looking place to do some scavenging in. And that held up a lot of the experience for me. You know, the writing and the little points of interest. I thought it was like the map was great. So hopefully City has more of that for me. So totally recommend, definitely worth going back to and checking out. Just a very fun, short, again, like 17-hour experience. I finished it in a couple sittings. Always feel like I was making progress. There was like 1 or 2 times where I got stuck. I had to look up a couple of the Riddler things on the internets. Just because some of them were honestly very obscure. And there were a few points where like, okay, there was like one point where this is a game where it's going to teach you to look up because there's like grapple points that I would have never seen. I would have never seen if I didn't look them up. And I was just like, where the fuck do I go? Oh, I just have to grapple to a point that's up there. Cool. Yeah, Arkham Asylum. Check it out. Holds up very well, in my opinion. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much. If you've been listening this far, thank you so much for listening to me ramble. If you have a question, feel free to leave it down in the comments below, but please phrase it in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. It's May. I'm doing my thing. Join us next time. I don't know. That's whatever. I'm very excited for Slayer. I'll definitely be streaming that at the end of the month. Bye.